Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, we are jumping right into this today. We're doing a minute-by-minute breakdown of one of the most intense, completely unbelievable tactical survival stories in modern law enforcement. We're looking at the true story of Sergeant Sacramento. He was an off-duty military police officer in Rio de Janeiro who suddenly found himself trapped in an absolute nightmare scenario. We're going to walk through exactly how he survived an impossible situation using just raw tactical instinct.
60-1. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the terrifying asymmetry of the engagement we're looking at today. 60 heavily armed insurgents facing down a single, off-duty officer. Sacramento wasn't on a raid, you know? He wasn't geared up for combat. He just suddenly and unexpectedly found himself completely surrounded by a massive insurgent force inside a favela.
To truly grasp the life-or-death stakes here, you have to hear about Sacramento's frantic dispatch call. He calls his colleague Vieira, desperately asking for an armored rescue vehicle. His colleague tells him to just stay calm and wait for backup. Sacramento's response? Calm down, when they get here, I'll be dead. It plunges us straight into the sheer terror of his reality. But to understand how he even ended up making this call, let's rewind and look at how this whole thing started.
Section 1. The fatal GPS mistake.
What's really fascinating here is how a completely mundane, everyday errand descended into absolute chaos in a matter of seconds. It was a Saturday. Sacramento was off duty. To supplement his income, he actually worked a side job as a refrigeration technician. Well, his own washing machine had broken down, and he'd forgotten the front plate for it at a parts shop earlier in the week, so he just went to go retrieve it. The fatal mistake happens on his way back. Following a simple GPS reroute, he drives a black Fiat Toro with deeply tinted windows straight into the Cidade Alta favela. And in these areas, driving a blacked-out truck with the windows rolled up, that is a massive red flag to local gangs.
Now, you might be wondering, why didn't he just turn around, right? Well, it was an unmarked stronghold. Sacramento noted that he actually saw a parked police car at the entrance of the street. Because of that, he had absolutely no idea he was driving into an insurgent-controlled zone. Everything just looked like a totally normal street, until 3 men armed with rifles suddenly walked right up to his vehicle.
Section 2. Ambush and Tactical Retreat.
And this is the moment the tension just snaps. The ambush begins. As the men approached, Sacramento lowered his window slightly. When one of the armed men peeked in, Sacramento drew his weapon and fired, instantly neutralizing the immediate threat. But then, total disaster. His single pistol jammed. Contrast his initial vulnerability here, one jammed pistol, against an overwhelming enemy force of 60 men armed with military rifles and grenades, who literally immediately opened fire on his truck.
So with bullets raining down, he makes a split-second decision. He ducks his head down below the dashboard and just floors the accelerator. He physically smashes his truck right through the gang's street barricades. Now, during this chaotic escape, his car's radiator gets pierced by gunfire. The engine totally loses power and dies right near a local train station. Knowing the vehicle was compromised, Sacramento grabbed his keys, grabbed his phone, abandoned the truck, and fled on foot deeper into the unknown.
Section 3. The 300 choke point defense.
Okay, now we are entering one of the most incredible tactical segments of this whole explainer. To understand his brilliant decision to level the playing field, we've got to talk about choke points. Sacramento later stated that in that moment of sheer panic, the movie 300 actually flashed into his mind. Inspired by King Leonidas, he knew for a fact he couldn't survive in an open space against 60 rifles. So he jumped a wall and found a house with a long, narrow corridor and a staircase. By positioning himself at this choke point, he mathematically funneled his attackers. He forced them to face him one by one, rather than all at once.
But the psychological terror he was under was immense. See, inside that house was a local teenager. Sacramento had to basically hold him hostage, keeping him quiet to prevent his exact location from leaking to the cartel outside. As this siege dragged on and his pistol ammunition dwindled, Sacramento openly contemplated suicide. He knew about the horrific, gruesome torture that captured police officers face in these favelas, and he resolved right then and there that his very last bullet would be for himself, to avoid being taken alive.
Then came the critical turning point. 2 insurgents finally tracked him down and knocked violently on the door. Despite Sacramento's strict warnings, the panicked teenager yelled out and actually opened it. The very second that door cracked open, Sacramento instantly shot and neutralized the first insurgent. The second attacker was so completely startled by this fierce resistance that he dropped his weapon and actually jumped off a first-floor balcony to flee.
Section 4. Capturing the G3 rifle.
This right here changes everything. The momentum of the battle violently flipped in Sacramento's favor. He grabbed the neutralized insurgent by the ankles and literally dragged him inside, securing a massive upgrade in firepower. From this attacker, he seized a G3 rifle chambered in high-powered 7.62 military caliber, several full magazines of ammunition, and 2 grenades. He literally armed himself directly from the enemy.
But there was a terrifying hiccup. Sacramento wasn't actually familiar with the G3 rifle. In the heat of the moment, with his heart pounding and enemies swarming outside, he just couldn't figure out how to cock the weapon. He's desperately searching for the charging handle. In his interview, he mentions that an internal voice spoke to him clearly in that exact moment, saying just one word, calma, which means calm down. That single split second of clarity allowed him to locate the obscure charging handle, pull it back, and rack around into the chamber. Capturing this military-grade rifle was an absolute lifeline. Now armed with 7.62 rounds, Sacramento could finally return devastating fire. In fact, his shots were so powerful and so loud that the insurgents outside actually thought they were fighting a rival gang trying to take over their territory. This overwhelming return fire forced the attackers to keep their distance, buying Sacramento the most precious resource of all, time.
Section 5. The Coordinated Caveron Rescue.
We are now entering the final, highly complex phase of the siege, surviving long enough for heavily armored backup to actually arrive. But the rescue was not simple at all. First, you had bureaucratic delays. Because this happened during the pandemic, the Supreme Federal Court had placed strict operational restrictions on police raids in favelas. This meant commanders couldn't just send a rescue team instantly. They had to clear massive bureaucratic hurdles while Sacramento is actively fighting for his life. And while he waited, insurgents actually managed to throw a grenade up his stairs, forcing him to scramble further into the house, all while dodging continuous flanking fire from a rear wall.
Finally, the armored police truck, the Caveron, arrives. But this created a brand new, deadly problem: friendly fire. Think about it. Sacramento is in civilian clothes, holding an enemy assault rifle inside an insurgent stronghold. So he has to perfectly coordinate with Lieutenant Botcher over the phone. He tells the lieutenant to reverse the armored truck right up to the door and to look up. Then, to signal he's friendly without exposing his whole body to gunfire, Sacramento just shakes the butt of the captured G3 rifle out the shattered window. The police recognized the signal, entered the house, and finally secured him.
Section 6. Aftermath and Bravery Recognition.
Unbelievable, right? Let's conclude this narrative by looking at the official aftermath and the results of this harrowing 50-minute ordeal. The military police opened a formal bravery process to investigate everything. Sacramento was officially recognized for his actions. The documentation confirmed he survived an ambush of roughly 60 armed men entirely alone. He neutralized 2 criminals and successfully seized high-caliber military weaponry and explosives. Because of this undeniable tactical mastery and survival instinct, he was officially promoted to second sergeant.
But here is perhaps the most mind-blowing detail of all. 2. That is the number of days it took for him to go back to work. After surviving a traumatic, movie-like shootout that would completely break most people, his colleagues obviously urged him to take psychiatric leave. But Sacramento? He completely refused. Astoundingly, just 2 days later, he put his uniform back on and returned to active duty like it was just another day.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative question to end our explainer on. How much of survival is training, and how much is just the raw instinct to refuse defeat? Sergeant Sacramento obviously used tactical knowledge, like identifying a choke point, but it was his absolute refusal to surrender that kept him alive when his pistol jammed against 60 rifles. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Think about that resilience, and I will catch you next time as we break down another fascinating topic.